What if I told you that there is a solution to the ongoing rent crisis we're all facing today? And not only that, it's a surprisingly simple solution that pretty much any of you watching could immediately start doing today. Welcome to the world of rent strikes. We've spent a lot of time on this channel exposing how it's basically pointless for Gen Z to bother working a traditional 9-to-5 job these days. The low wages, terrible working conditions, and insanely competitive job market just makes it such that the juice just isn't worth the squeeze anymore. But jobs are only half of the problem here. The other half of the problem, which is just as big, is just how unbearably expensive everything has gotten these days, especially rent. Rent being this insanely expensive is a fundamentally different and bigger problem than anything else getting this expensive for the simple fact that it's a non-negotiable human need. If a TV suddenly doubled in price and became super expensive overnight, you could simply choose to not buy the TV. But this is exactly what's happened with rent the last few years, and you can't simply just not pay rent because the alternative is to go homeless. There isn't really much you can do about it, unfortunately. Or is there? You see, people are being pushed to the absolute limit now, and the problem is you can only push them so far until they snap. Sometimes this can manifest in a violent physical way, but other times they learn to band together and fight back legally with their strength in numbers. This is what we're seeing finally starting to take place with the countless rent strikes that are going on all over the country right now. They've had enough and they're fighting back against these absurd rent costs. And in many cases, they're actually winning. A rent strike pretty much functions the same way as a labor strike does, where instead of workers, tenants band together, form a union, and all collectively agree to stop paying rent. I had only heard of rent strikes recently myself, and I had such a damn, why didn't I think of that earlier epiphany kind of reaction when I heard about it. Rent strikes are fundamentally different and more effective than labor strikes for the simple fact that instead of withholding labor, which the company actually saves money on while you're striking, withholding rent directly cuts off the landlord's revenue stream, and as we all know, there is nothing rich people love more than revenue. A lot of corporations have deep pockets, which make it so they can weather the storm and withstand a few months without labor, while still making profits. They can also simply replace you with cheap migrant labor, as we've all seen. But for landlords, it's a bit of a different story. You see, not only are you directly cutting off their income source by collectively refusing to pay rent, they can't simply replace you with cheap migrant tenants because, well, they're not going to be able to afford these ridiculous rent prices either. Rent strikes are nothing new. You can find examples of rent strikes being organized since the early 1900s, but recently they've surged in popularity for obvious reasons I'm sure we're all aware of by now. The best part, a lot of them are actually winning against their greedy, corrupt, price gouging landlords. For example, recently in Brooklyn, tenants won an extended rent strike that lasted 4 years when a judge determined that the landlord, who, by the way, were known as New York's worst landlord, did not make adequate necessary repairs to the apartments and as a result waived $250,000 of rental debts owed by the tenants between 2020 and 2022. And at the end of 2024, they defeated eviction attempts from their new landlords who took over in 2022. This was a bit of a unique case, as it wasn't just a protest against high rent prices. There was an actual legal basis behind it, as the landlord neglected their fundamental legal landlord duties. So the renters not only won financially, but in a legal sense as well. But what if there are no problems with the apartment and you just want to protest these insane, way too high rent prices? Has that been done successfully? Well, let's find out. In Toronto, Canada, a group of nearly 100 tenants have banded together and formed a tenants union to fight back against a 10% proposed increase in their rents from their landlords. Now, this comes after rent prices have already surged completely out of control the last few years and pushed people to their absolute limit. Now, the fight is still ongoing, and it remains to be seen if the proposed rent increase will be successfully defeated. But in the meantime, the tenants have managed to successfully avoid paying rent for a year now without getting evicted. I mean, what can the landlords actually do? Evicting over 100 people at once isn't just a massive challenge from a legal standpoint, it also undermines their bottom line of revenue and profits. So, the rent strike, it is a very interesting and creative solution to say the least. So, where does this all leave you? Presumably a young person struggling this economy and dealing with these insane rent prices taking up over half your paycheck. Well, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, this is a solution that you can actively begin organizing even right now. I'm talking even right after you finish watching this video. If you're feeling fed up with these insane rent prices, I guarantee you're not alone. And especially if your apartment has actual structural/functional issues that potentially violate the rental agreement and prove the landlord is neglecting their responsibilities, you can talk to your fellow renters, see how they feel about the issue, and if you can get enough people on your side, you can form a tenant union and fight back with your strength in numbers. Gen Z especially has an advantage here, in my opinion, as you guys are just so tech savvy, you can spread the word exponentially faster via your social media skills as well, and get even more people on your side. And somehow, I have a feeling with how fed up people are with these insane modern day rent prices, it won't be that hard to spread your message.